The forest stood tall and silent. Dark trees reached up like twisted claws. Shadows stretched out like long fingers. The air was thick and heavy. It smelled of damp earth and pine needles. No light touched the forest floor. The trees blocked out the moon and stars. It was a place of deep shadows and hidden things. A place where anything could be watching. The camper hummed softly to himself, a gentle tune that seemed to blend perfectly with the serene surroundings. The night was calm, and the stars above twinkled like tiny diamonds scattered across a velvet sky. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth, a reminder of the untouched beauty of nature. He felt a deep sense of contentment, a rare feeling in his otherwise hectic life. He stirred the fire with a stick, watching the embers glow brighter with each gentle poke. The flames responded with a lively dance, casting flickering shadows that played on the surrounding trees. It was a simple act, yet it brought him immense satisfaction. The fire was his companion, its warmth a comforting presence in the cool night air. Flames crackled and danced, casting a warm glow on his face. The light illuminated his features, revealing a peaceful expression. He watched the flames, mesmerized by their unpredictable movements. Each flicker and spark seemed to tell a story, a tale of ancient times when fire was the heart of human gatherings. It was a connection to the past, a reminder of simpler times. He was alone in the wilderness, miles away from the nearest town. The isolation was not a burden, but a blessing. It was a chance to disconnect from the constant noise and demands of modern life. Here, he could hear his own thoughts, reflect on his journey, and find clarity in the silence. The forest was his sanctuary, a place where he could truly be himself. He loved the feeling of peace and quiet. The solitude was a balm for his soul, soothing the stresses and worries that had accumulated over time. In the stillness, he found a sense of balance and harmony. The natural world, with its rhythms and cycles, offered a perspective that was often lost in the hustle and bustle of daily life. It was a reminder of what truly mattered. The city was loud and busy, a constant barrage of sounds and sights that never seemed to rest. The hustle and bustle, the endless stream of people and vehicles, created a cacophony that could be overwhelming. It was a stark contrast to the tranquility he found in the wilderness. The city's energy was both invigorating and exhausting, a double-edged sword that he needed to escape from time to time. But here, there was only the sound of the wind and the crackling fire, the gentle rustle of leaves, the occasional call of a night bird, and the rhythmic crackle of burning wood created a symphony of nature. It was a melody that calmed his mind and eased his heart. The simplicity of these sounds was a stark reminder of the beauty that could be found in the natural world, away from the artificial noise of civilization. It was his escape from the world, a chance to recharge, to reconnect with himself and the earth. Each moment spent in this peaceful solitude was a gift, a precious opportunity to find inner peace. As he sat by the campfire, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the quiet, for the beauty of the night, and for the chance to simply be. This was his sanctuary, his refuge, and he cherished every second of it. A twig snapped. The camper froze, listening. His heart thumped in his chest. He turned slowly, peering into the darkness beyond the firelight. Something moved out there. 2 points of light stared back at him. They blinked slowly, like the eyes of a cat. He couldn't make out what they belonged to. He felt a chill run down his spine. He was being watched. The next night, the eyes returned. They seemed to pierce through the darkness, glowing with an unsettling intensity. It was as if they were searching for something or someone. The forest, usually a place of solace and tranquility, now felt like a realm of unknown terrors. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. The eyes were not just watching, they were waiting. This time, they were closer. Much closer. The distance that once provided a sense of safety was now gone. He could feel their presence, almost as if they were breathing down his neck. The air grew colder, and a shiver ran down his spine. He knew he wasn't alone. The eyes were drawing nearer, inch by inch, night by night. He could see the faint outline of figures standing at the edge of the light. They were barely visible, just shadows against the backdrop of the night. But their presence was undeniable. The campfire, which once provided warmth and comfort, now cast eerie shadows that danced and flickered, adding to the growing sense of dread. The figures seemed to be waiting, watching, and biding their time. They were tall and slender like shadows given form. Their movements were almost imperceptible, but he could sense them shifting, swaying with the wind. They seemed to blend seamlessly with the darkness, making it hard to distinguish where the shadows ended and the figures began. Their elongated forms were both mesmerizing and terrifying, a haunting presence that loomed over him. He tried to tell himself it was just his imagination, that the figures were nothing more than tricks of the light, illusions created by his mind. But deep down he knew the truth. The fear was real, and it was growing stronger with each passing night. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond the light. But the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. It was an instinctual reaction, a primal response to the unseen threat. Every fiber of his being was on high alert, ready to flee at a moment's notice. The sensation was both familiar and foreign, a reminder of the thin line between reality and imagination. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. He felt a growing sense of unease. It was a gnawing feeling, a constant presence that refused to be ignored. The nights were becoming longer, the darkness more oppressive. He found himself glancing over his shoulder, expecting to see the figures standing right behind him. The fear was consuming him, taking over his thoughts and leaving him in a state of perpetual anxiety. They were coming closer each night. The distance between them and him was shrinking, and he knew it was only a matter of time before they reached him. The nights were filled with dread, each one worse than the last. He could feel their presence growing stronger, their intentions becoming clearer. The eyes, the figures, the shadows, they were all part of a larger, more sinister plan, and he was at the center of it all, unable to escape the inevitable confrontation that awaited him. The camper couldn't sleep. He lay awake in his tent, listening to the sounds of the forest. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying strange sounds to his ears. Whispers? Footsteps? He imagined the figures moving closer, their eyes boring into him. He felt a cold sweat break out on his skin. He was trapped in his tent, alone with whatever lurked in the darkness. He considered packing up and leaving, but what if they followed him? What if they were waiting for him to run? He was paralyzed with fear, unable to decide what to do. He felt utterly alone. The forest, once peaceful, now felt like a prison. The darkness pressed in on him from all sides. He was trapped in a nightmare. Suddenly the fire crackled, sending sparks flying into the night. He looked up and gasped. A face appeared in the flames. It was pale and gaunt, with eyes that burned like hot coals. He blinked, and the face was gone. Had he imagined it? Or was it a warning? His heart pounded in his chest. He was running out of time. One night he woke to a strange sound just outside his tent, a soft, shuffling sound. He held his breath and listened. The sound came again, closer this time. He was too scared to even scream. The figures were right outside his tent. He could feel their presence, cold and menacing. He lay there, frozen with fear, waiting for what would happen next. He squeezed his eyes shut tight, waiting for the worst. But it never came. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos that had ensued just moments before. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears like a drum. He could feel the cold sweat trickling down his forehead, his body trembling with fear. The darkness around him seemed to close in, suffocating him, making it hard to breathe. He tried to calm his racing thoughts, but the fear was overwhelming. He had never felt so vulnerable, so exposed. The tent, which had once been a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. He could hear the rustling of leaves outside, the distant hoot of an owl, but nothing else. The figures that had haunted him were gone, but their presence lingered in his mind, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked in the shadows. He slowly opened one eye and then the other. The figures were gone. The forest, which had been alive with movement and sound, was now eerily silent. He scanned the area, his eyes darting from tree to tree, searching for any sign of life. But there was nothing, just the stillness of the night and the faint rustling of leaves in the breeze. He felt a momentary sense of relief, but it was quickly replaced by a nagging sense of unease. He knew that the danger was far from over. The figures might be gone, but the fear remained. It clung to him like a second skin, making it impossible to relax. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves, but it did little to calm the storm raging inside him. He let out a shaky breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The air felt cool against his skin, a stark contrast to the heat of his fear. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to gather his thoughts. He needed to think clearly to figure out his next move, but his mind was a whirlwind of emotions, making it hard to focus. He felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him, the adrenaline that had kept him going now leaving him drained. He knew he couldn't stay in the tent any longer. He needed to get out, to find a way to escape the nightmare that had become his reality. He stumbled out of his tent and looked around. The forest was empty. The moonlight cast eerie shadows on the ground, making the trees look like twisted, gnarled fingers reaching out to grab him. He shivered, pulling his jacket tighter around him. The cold night air bit at his skin, but he barely noticed. His mind was focused on one thing: survival. He needed to find a way out of the forest, to get to safety. But the path ahead was unclear, and the fear of the unknown gnawed at him. He took a tentative step forward, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, made his heart race. He felt like a hunted animal, constantly on edge, waiting for the next attack. He was safe. Or was he? The thought lingered in his mind, a constant reminder of the danger that still lurked in the shadows. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that the figures were still out there, waiting for him to let his guard down. He tried to push the thought away, to focus on finding a way out, but it was always there, lurking in the back of his mind. He felt a chill run down his spine, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. He knew he couldn't afford to let his guard down, not even for a moment. The forest was a dangerous place, and he needed to stay alert if he wanted to survive. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every sound a potential danger. He felt like he was being hunted, the figures from his nightmares always just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He tried to stay calm, to keep his wits about him, but the fear was overwhelming. It clouded his judgment, making it hard to think clearly. He knew he needed to find a way out of the forest, but every path seemed to lead to more danger. He felt trapped, like a mouse in a maze with no way out. The fear was suffocating, making it hard to breathe. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves, but it did little to calm the storm raging inside him. That the figures were still out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting for him to let his guard down. His nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. The forest seemed to close in around him, the trees like silent sentinels watching his every move. He felt a sense of dread wash over him, the realization that he might never escape this nightmare. But he couldn't give up. He had to keep moving, to keep fighting. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. The path was uncertain, the danger ever present, but he knew he had to keep going. There was no escape, but he couldn't let the fear consume him. He had to find a way to survive, to outsmart the figures that haunted him. The night was dark and full of terrors, but he was determined to make it through. One step at a time, he would find a way out of the